I'm Paul Van Squike, your Taekwondo guide, and this is Topic Tuesday, the place where people ask me questions or leave me comments about the martial arts and we talk about it. We have a conversation. If you're new around here, it's just me talking to the camera. We're having a dialogue. So I won't be offended if you want to pop your headphones in and just listen and get some things done. You can go around your house and clean up some messes. You can cook dinner for your family. You can make the world a more beautiful place while you listen to a conversation about the martial arts that we love to practice. Let's start out with our first topic. And actually, before we start off with our topics, let me just mention that I did yet again attempt a Topic Tuesday last week and threw it out. Once again, I threw it out because I'm going through all of these internal philosophical changes and I feel like I'm not giving coherent answers sometimes. So I apologize for that. I'm going to go through a lot of these questions again for this week, since you guys didn't hear Topic Tuesday last week. So from Daryl, how would you like to discuss the recent use adding training equipment to classes? Do you add in stretching resistance bands, rope ladders for stepping, medicine balls, jump rope, these types of things? How much is too much so dojongs aren't too much like CrossFit? Is the recent trend on this on the rise or not of interest or a decline with students? Yeah, that's a good question, Daryl. I think it really depends on the type of training that you're doing. And by that I mean, are you doing traditional training or are you doing sport training? If you're training for competition, then you want whatever kind of edge you can get. You're looking for that 1% improvement, the unfair advantage, the secret knowledge that the other guy doesn't know. The alchemists of old, right, trying to turn the philosopher's stone into gold. You're looking for that magic route to victory. And of course, if you're doing all the normal stuff, if you're working hard, you're filling out your training schedule, then it does come down to the quality of your training. And do you have all of the tools that are going to give you that cutting edge? So because of that, my sparring coach is the one who's constantly playing with stuff. He's got a lot of the things you mentioned, resistance bands, rope ladders, medicine balls, all of that kind of stuff that he's working with his students on. I don't use much of anything outside of what has already been developed for traditional martial arts, going back some 100 years now in many instances, like things like the heavy bag. The most recent innovation I use a lot is the clapper paddle, which probably, I don't know, goes back to the 70s or something like that now. So I tend not to mess with too many of the gadgets that you can implement in your training because I'm a traditional teacher. So for me, it's more about the practice than about the competitive result. I don't really care about that 1 or 2% advantage. It's about the experience that students have when they come in the door and about being a lifestyle rather than this program where you're seeking victory over another, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't use a whole lot of gadgetry in my classes. But I do use some of these things for physical therapy, like I have resistance bands that I used for glute strengthening exercises to help with the hip injuries that I have incurred over the years, and just try to use those to help keep my hips strong. That's something, though, that I wouldn't necessarily tell everybody to do. It's specific to me and physical therapy that helps my particular ailment. So it's more of an exercise outside of my training than part of the training itself. From Michael R1244, thank you, Paul, for responding to my 2 questions from last week. I will look into Mad Men. He's talking about Don Draper, who I jokingly said is not Don Draper from Mad Men, for Taekwondo history and continue my sparring classes. As feedback, I've gone back to watch your previous content outside of the tutorials and really enjoyed the ones on the history, i.e. your history of kicking video, and the symbolisms in Taekwondo. I completely understand that the ROI may not be there for doing any more in the future, but just wanted to share my thanks on what you've already done, as it's given me a greater appreciation to Taekwondo. If you haven't yet, yeah, check out those videos. I think a lot of you guys would enjoy them about Taekwondo's history and philosophy. Trying to think of the name. One is the evolution of Taekwondo kicks. That's one of the more recent ones. And then the other one has to do with the symbolism in Taekwondo, and it's something like magic or something like that in Taekwondo. It has to do with the divination signs, the trigrams found in the I Ching, and how they show up in the Taeguk forms. Kind of a fun, interesting video if you haven't seen it. Yes, you're right. Those don't get watched nearly as much as technical ones, but you know, when I started this channel, it was more of an entrepreneurial pursuit, but right about the same time I started it, I started getting really severe hip trouble, and that really prevented me from doing the technical tutorials for Taekwondo. So the channel really isn't about being a business anymore so much as just interacting with the martial arts community and trying to get out messages that I think are important. So I'm happy to do more videos just to do them, just to share things that are interesting and of value. I just am limited by time right now. That's my only issue. So I don't foresee any in the near future, but I might get back to it eventually when things settle down a little bit more with the newborn situation. That really changes things. You know, when you ask your spouse for permission to go to the bathroom, I'm sure many of you guys have been there having a newborn child. That's just how it is for a while. So maybe once that settles down a bit, I can look at doing some more of those types of videos. Next, Michael asks, my question for this week's Topic Tuesday is, in addition to a heavy bag and kick pads, are there any other pieces of equipment that you'd recommend for practicing at home as a family? That's so funny, so similar to Daryl's topic. Let's start with that one. I think those are the two big ones. There's not a whole lot else that I'd say universally is applicable for at-home training, but one thing that can be of value, especially if you like to do competitive board breaking, is some of those practice rebreakable boards. So certainly if you want to do competitive board breaking, those are handy to have, but particularly for kids, I think they're great in that they don't lie. The child has to do the technique correctly in order for the board to break. So, you know, you can tell a child until you're blue in the face sometimes to kick something with their heel, and if it feels like it's strong to them, they just might not make the change. But if they're failing to break the board, then often they're more open to the feedback that will help them. So they can be useful in that regard as well. Number two, question number two, you have previously used the analogy of a black belt as a university degree, an MBA, but doesn't mean you can run a business. Yeah, someone else used that in the topics, and I thought it was a good one, so I repeated it. Does this analogy extend to the recognition of credit of another related martial art? As an example, if a student would start at your school who already holds a black belt in karate, would it be the same as any other student, or can their previous proficiency be recognized and fast-tracked through the belt system? This is really going to depend on a couple things. Number one, each individual instructor's take on this situation, and number two, how similar their training is to your current system. So what I tend to do, say someone comes in with a background in karate, I don't need to give them the training wheels stuff. So white belt and yellow belt in our system are a bunch of training wheels stuff. We don't even teach the Taeguk form at that level. You're getting really elementary forms. So I would start them right away at purple belt. That's where they're getting the true content without the training wheels on. But they probably, even in spite of their proficiency in karate, they don't know the Taeguk forms. They don't know a lot of the things within the curriculum of my particular system. So it wouldn't necessarily make sense to start them at too high of a rank. And I think if you start them lower, you can also give them a sense of momentum. Fast tracking them, that's a tough choice. If it's a similar program, I could certainly see fast tracking them. So I would make it a case by case basis. when I trained in Okinawan karate, a system called Weichiru, the instructor was kind enough to fast track me so that I could do more of the complex content out of the gate, which I was really grateful for. So I think that can help keep someone motivated who has a lot of experience already. And I don't see how it's going to hurt much of anything. So that's my take on it, but it's going to depend on each instructor. There are people, I'll put it this way, right? I've been doing a lot of historical digging on the Catholic Church, and you know, this idea that it's the universal church. That's how they see it, and a lot of people think that their martial arts organization is like that, and so by that I mean they think it's ordained by God, it's holy, it's something that if you didn't learn it their way, then you learned it the wrong way, and so you have to start at the very beginning so you can learn it the way that God intended it to be practiced. But unfortunately, I'd love if there were a martial arts system given to us by God, but there isn't, and so I don't think that is a good way to look at it, unfortunately. All right, let's move on to the next topic from Ronald Velviz, who writes, "Thank you, Paul, for your input, and I appreciate your clear explanation regarding the art and actual application. I was intrigued and will do more research into karate in its original forms to see how perhaps I may add or try to apply these moves, which would be better for real-life self-defense versus competitive taekwondo moves. I will continue to do taekwondo as it has been great for both me and my son. In fact, my son had to use his taekwondo kicks recently in school to keep a bigger guy off of him. I was proud of him, but also advised him not to take that as a point to glorify violence or make anyone feel bad after being able to defend yourself." That's a really good way to teach your child there. Very, very good for you. I am a Christian, and foremost, I want him to show love and compassion. So this is an example that taekwondo does work. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We get caught in this binary. Does it work or does it not work? And as you guys have probably heard me say before, it's not so much a binary as does this thing work better than this thing or not. I would say that a lot of traditional martial arts are kind of comparable in some ways to classic cars. And by that I mean they work. They get you from point A to B. If all you're concerned about is reliable transportation, then you're probably going to be better off with a more modern car. Some people would argue otherwise, but I think that's generally going to be the case. What are some of the things you miss out on, though? You miss out on the beauty of the classic car, the artistry of the classic car, the sense of history with the classic car. And the classic car still gets you from A to B. It just might not do it, again, in as good of a fashion, if we want to use that word, in a fashion that's as comfortable, as reliable, as luxurious perhaps even, as a modern car. And so you could say the same with martial arts. There are martial arts that are better for the fighting component. They just are. They have more practical training devoted to that part of the study. That doesn't mean that a traditional martial art that has less time devoted to that part of the study doesn't work at all. It's not a binary. So I'm glad you said that. One question: give me your best advice for my first sparring tournament as a 50-year-old. Include anything from techniques, types of kicks, stamina training. Add anything you want, or simply tell me, quit while you can. Biggest advice for anyone starting sparring is the mindset component. And sometimes you just have to get in there and let your brain do its silly stuff a few times before you can get control of it. Fighting brings about a passion in your body. I think anyone who's sparred before has felt this, where you kind of like, it's not rage, but you get this sense of like, I gotta get him. And you get the adrenaline dump. And you lose sense of your rational faculties. And when you do that, in but 10 or 15 seconds, you lose all of your stamina. You probably didn't accomplish very much. And it's really easy for that to happen, especially if somebody gives you a good hard whack. All of your rational faculties they're gone. So, as much as possible, try to keep your senses, try to keep yourself relaxed, keep yourself in a rational state of mind. Keep that stallion, which is your passions, under control so that you can harness it at the appropriate times. Now, for me, that took a lot of repetition. I had to do, I don't remember, 6 or more sparring competitions, maybe more than that, before I felt like I could spar the same way that I would in class, where I wasn't letting the anxieties of the environment dictate how I was fighting. So you gotta, I think part of it, not put too much pressure on yourself for the winning of the event, for the, not even necessarily winning, but the way that people are perceiving you. We get hyper-fixated on what others think about us while we're performing, be it poomsae sparring, whatever else, and that goofs with our head. Doesn't matter if you lose. Doesn't matter if you win. The competition is part of the overall practice of Taekwondo. The practice is about becoming a better person. Either way, when you practice, you're going to get a result from that makes you a better person. That's your goal. So if you use the competition as a way of testing your ability to retain your rational faculties while you're in a stressful situation, if you do that and you technically lose the match, you've still won. You've still achieved the most valuable part of putting yourself in a situation like that. So I guess if you orient your goals toward something that you actually can control, and when I say that, winning to a degree is something you can control, but if you're simply outclassed, you're simply outclassed. There's not a lot you can do if someone's got a big gap ahead of you. There's a little bit of wiggle room, right, where you harness your skills to the best of your ability, and you might be able to overcome someone who's in that same realm of wiggle room, right, where you can play a bunch of matches and it's going to look like a sine wave between who's winning or losing. But a lot of times there's just someone who's either well below or well above your capability threshold. And if that's the case, if they're well above it, it's out of your control to win the match. So then what is something you can control? Keeping your faculties during those situations. So if you orient your goals toward things that you can control and take away the hyperfixation on the outcome, that can really help keep the calm in the first place. So that's my biggest bit of advice, is to keep your rational faculties as much as possible. From Michael, BL5XH. Hi, Paul. Thanks for the video as always. I had a shorter and possibly obvious question, but I have a couple of students who are very nervous and hesitant when it comes to sparring. So funny how these questions are so close to each other. Would it be a good idea for me, the instructor, to spar with them so I can give them a controlled environment, or would that not work as well as I think? I do think that would be a good idea because, yes, you can control the environment a lot better when you spar with them. If they're nervous, it's probably because they're afraid of the contact. So what I tend to do is I boil the frog slowly, as they say. So I'll start a student by just saying, I'll go up and I'll just kind of tap them with my hand. I go, does that bother you? And they always say no. And then I say, okay, we're just going to start with that level of contact. Okay, then you can progressively elevate things. I also don't let them do any head contact at all. Okay, eventually they can do light head contact and then harder body contact, but they always have the option in my class of telling their partner to step it down a little bit if they need to. What that does is it allows them the out, so takes away the sense that they have to be nervous about something, because they can control the level of intensity they want to experience in a class. And without a doubt, eventually what happens is they get used to sparring, and then you get two people together who are used to sparring. Well, they're doing some hard sparring now, and they're doing it safely because they're both at the same level and they're both used to the contact. But I think turning, I'm laughing because, back during COVID, our lovely governor here had this analogy of turning the light switch on slowly, the dial slowly, right? But I do think it applies here. If you just flip the lights on, you can disorient somebody. So I think with sparring, just turn up the heat slowly, and they're more likely to have a good experience, and you can get them past those hurdles of nerves. From JV Kanofan 8115. Hey Paul, thank you for addressing my comment. I have two things to add this week. First is my Jido-kwan lineage. Dongjang, our head instructor, still teaches the Jido-kwan Mumtong Maki, but says the standard WT version is also permissible. Secondly, on the value of poomsae, I think they are more than athleticized shadow boxing. Of course, there's the symbolism attached to each one with the trigram elements. However, I think they are foundational in terms of learning balance, structure, and mass utilization. They also provide joint and neuromuscular conditioning. Okay, so much overlap with shadow boxing, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but poomsae is my favorite part of Taekwondo, and I feel it is a mirror and provides much to reflect on. Don't know if you want to respond further. Yeah, so I did not mean to insult poomsae or kata by calling them athleticized shadow boxing. I don't know about you, but I shadow box all the time. I find it incredibly valuable, and numerous proficient martial artists have said the same. Shadow boxing has been considered valuable throughout history. It's a massive part of the martial arts toolbox, and so to formalize that, to add symbolic elements to it, to athleticize it, that's not a bad thing. So I'm just trying to be honest about what it is in terms of application, because I think just as you can turn the dial in sparring, you can turn the dial on your forms. How close do you want it to mirror the authentic look and feel of the situation it's representing versus stylize and athleticize it? You can turn that knob around. And so I think what we have in modern Taekwondo is a dial turned more toward stylized and athleticized movement than what it looks like in its original context. So that's what you have less of in something like Okinawan karate. And so while they're both stylized, while they're both athleticized, while they both have symbolism encoded into them, one is more reminiscent of the actual fighting movements than the other. And I think if we're not honest about that, then we're just not going to arrive at as much truth in what the movements are. And that's not to say you can't derive combative techniques from the movements, simply that you have to, I think, to do them in a more authentic way, modify them from what they look like in modern Taekwondo poomsae. That's what I'm mostly getting at there. I like poomsae as well, so that is not meant as a form of degradation when I say athleticized shadowboxing. From Old Movie Rob, do you have any stretching guidance, particularly for students 50 plus? Thanks. Yeah, so any time we're talking about building a type of athleticism, be it strength, flexibility, patience is paramount. Do not try to push things too far, too early. Listen to your body. And consistency is the big important factor. Whether we're talking strength training or flexibility or stamina, if you're doing the practice regularly rather than sporadically at high intensity, I think it's going to be easier to build. And always, always, always listen to your body. You only get one of these. And if you damage it, then you're stuck with that damaged body. And that's a rough thing to experience. So, treat it with respect. Treat it like you want it to last as long as possible. Once again, like a classic car you care about. You're going to keep it well maintained. Maybe you redline it here and there, but you're not going to do that constantly because you want it to last. Maybe you want to pass it down. You can't do that with your body. Anyway, just be deliberate about your consistency and take your time would be my recommendation. I do have a course that contains my favorite stretches and strength training techniques for Taekwondo called How to Supercharge Your Taekwondo on my website, tkdguide.com. That's tkdguide.com if you want to check it out. From Keisha. Old lady here? Just kidding. I'm 36 and I love sparring. I'm doing the New York Open Taekwondo tournament in October. It's October now. I hope that you haven't done it yet. Please pray for me. Should I be resting a week or two before the tournament? I've been doubling up my training, but feeling more sore than usual, and even developed a cold due to stress on my body. I've been there, yeah. Or should I just push through? I'm sadly afraid if I rest, I'll undo my training. Please do tell me what to do. I'm not an expert in this matter, but I can't imagine you need to take more than 3 or 4 days off before your competition, and I don't think you'll see any degradation in that window of time. That would be my advice, but please, I'm not an expert on the intricacies of kind of performance athleticism like this that you would gear toward competition. That's just what my gut tells me from my own personal experience. Good luck to you, Keisha. I hope you do well. I hope it's a fruitful experience for you. Thank you guys so much for your participation in Topic Tuesday. If you would like to get another Topic Tuesday next time, I would say next week, but I've been inconsistent due to my complete reshuffling of my philosophical foundations. But if you want to get another Topic Tuesday, I will make one, I promise. Then get down in the comments, leave me a comment, and I'll have more to discuss for you next time. Until then, enjoy your training.